Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Wednesday, February 4th. The time is 6 p.m. At this time, I'd ask if everyone would stand and raise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Richard, stand. All right, thank you. Tonight, we only have one scheduled item on the agenda. It's to review and vote on the form of the draft community agreement for Hillman Energy. This time, I'm going to turn it over to the town manager to bring us through the changes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess where I'll start is where we left off on at the last meeting, at the joint meeting with the Board of Health, which was we asked people to submit their questions by Friday. We did receive a tremendous amount of questions, and we answered all of those questions. You've all received a copy. There's 37 pages of answers to questions that we received, and we posted those questions and answers online, so they're available for people to see. Some of the themes of the questions basically where I can give you just a basic breakdown of property value. Compensation was a very big theme throughout the questions, as well as what type of insurance was required for them if there was some type of incident, and how people might be compensated for their loss if something catastrophic did occur. I thought that those were the two most common questions, but there were also questions about safety and health risks, and there were questions about obviously about the process itself, transparency, so what I found was that most of those questions were in the HCA. I know that they're not exactly to the satisfaction of everybody. For example, the property value thing, we did address it, but obviously people would like it if they would pay for 100% of the property value. But we do have a provision there that addresses that. And I feel like that all of the questions that were raised are addressed in the HCA, and admittedly, they're probably not addressed the way everybody wants them addressed, but they are addressed. And most importantly, the health and safety issues are addressed very well. So what I'd like to do is just go through the HCA, not go through the whole thing, but just go through the red line things that have happened between now and the last time you received it, which was last week. And then just for your edification, let me just this pops up. All right, sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. So just, there's only a few changes in the red lined up version that you have, so I'm just gonna go through them now. So, on page 1, just a few syntax things, the and, you can see that. Page 2 is good. Page 3, you see that language is stricken out in that third paragraph because it was reworded and included in the language above, which is Exhibit E. And this has to do with building permits, and so building permits are contained in Exhibit E for $1.35 million. And so this change doesn't change any of the language, it's more of a format change. That was done to keep the money in one part of the document and the language in another part of the document. So that's why that was changed. Going through page 4, again, that's just striking out language that isn't necessary. Page 5. That's a comment that we resolved that's taken out. It says we prefer to keep all specific time and payments amounts in the exhibits. So that's what I was referring to before, that we're trying to keep the money in the exhibits documents and refer to them with the exhibits in the language of the document. So that's taken out. Regarding the project, that's just a highlight. Then on page 6, that's just taken out. That was resolved. They wanted more information, and they were communicating that to us. They no longer need that information, so that remains in the agreement. This was to get compensation for muni facility payments. So that's actually good. Page 7. This language, you can see it's added, prior to any such payment, any homeowner eligible for reimbursement shall provide in writing to Hillman Energy Center such reasonable financial and other identification information as Hillman Energy Center may request. So this is put in there. We were trying to get them to be the custodian of the money of the $50,000 so the town didn't have to get into that business. They wanted this language in there if that's the case, which is fine. If that doesn't pan out and we end up being the custodians of the money, it's not really a deal breaker either way. It's just that I would prefer not to get it, to have to deal with that fund. But if that's the way we have to do it, that language will probably come out and we'll handle the fund. And then in the top of page, I think 8, top of page 8, that money for the food pantry is going to be directly distributed to the food pantry and not, relayed through the town. That's 8. And then 9 is just eliminating, just putting in an acronym instead of NFPA instead of the whole word. Then in page 10, this is to eliminate the language that incorrect use of any funds paid by the Hillman Energy Center for any purpose would constitute a material breach of this agreement. We did not like that language because a material breach means that the whole thing could be tanked. And we didn't want that to be the case if there was one dispute over a payment. And instead, that's been taken out and it's referred to down in 19B. And there's a process to resolve, to resolve disputes on things with, if there's a dispute with language. Worst case scenario, their concern is fraud and you spend it for something completely inappropriate, which we're not really worried about that, but the more likely thing would be some dispute that it doesn't exactly match what they think it should. So But we wanted that language out because that language, we don't want it to constitute a material breach of the whole agreement. And so that language has been taken out. In 11, 12, okay. 13's okay. 14's good. 15, we incorporated language. I know that this was, James Mackey had asked for this. This is NERC language. It's basically make sure that they have physical security and cyber security things in place, which they're required to have anyway. But we wanted it spelled out in the contract, in the HCA, and so it's in there. And then also, we added local vendors, use local labor, but also local vendors to the agreement as well. Then going on, down 17's okay. And then under 18, those amounts aren't filled in yet because we have to finalize what the value of the project is before we can fill those in, but they will be filled in later. And those are guarantees to protect the town from, you know, if Hillman doesn't pay for some reason, it's almost like a bond, so. And then moving down, 19, 20, everything's okay there, then 21, 22, and that's really it. We gotta get Kevin Feely's address in there, and that's it. Those are all the changes to the document. So it will go to, if you vote tonight, it will go as it is here to the EFSB, be submitted as part of the testimony by the town. And if you adopted the motion that was presented, that was recommended, if there are some small material legal changes that need to be made, we can make those, but if there's some significant thing that we want to add later, that'll probably have to be, that would have to be negotiated anyway, but that's really it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board about the agreement, and also Special Counsel is here, Chip Bernstein. He's available to answer any questions as well.
All right, before we take it up for vote, I'm going to open it up to the board for any questions or concerns. Mr. Holland, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I don't have too many questions on the agreement itself, but I do have questions on the process. Now, if the project is approved, and that's an if, by the siting board, and we do not approve this agreement, what do we walk away with? I think our attorney should answer that question.
Okay.
Sure. If I understand the question correctly, if the board doesn't approve the host community agreement, but the siting board approves the project and the project proceeds, none of the provisions in this agreement in terms of the various financial provisions, in terms of the safety conditions and the whole protocols, none of those are going to be enforceable by the town. The siting board would probably adopt. In fact, if they approve it, they will certainly adopt safety conditions. And when they approve projects, they encourage the proponents of projects to work cooperatively with the host community. But none of the other host community fees, provision to provide funding for fire equipment and safety, I mean, the whole long list that's in the attachments, none of that would take effect. So you'd essentially, you would certainly try to work through some of those issues, but you wouldn't have any of the economic consideration, the special provision to have an expedited route for homeowners in addition to whatever they can do in court, but who claim that there's a diminution in value of their property. None of that would exist.
Okay, same thing, same scenario. If the board does approve this HCA and sends it to the siting board, can anything in this agreement be changed after it's submitted?
That's a very good question. We would ask the siting board to incorporate in its decision this agreement. The reality, and I've done this before, is they won't incorporate every last provision. So some of the economic terms they will not put into their decision, but you can enforce them independently. And there's an enforcement mechanism. The town manager asked me before this meeting exactly that question. So I suppose you could try to revise some of those other terms that aren't part of the siting board decision, some of those economic terms. I don't know why Hillman would do that, though. They wouldn't necessarily have any incentive, but some parts of it, I guess you could try to renegotiate.
Next question. Now, if the siting board denies the project and we do not approve this agreement, do we still get reimbursed for the legal or monies that we've spent for this?
Yes, you get a reimbursement. We're going to have a number. It's envisioned that the Hillman's parent is going to take this up at a corporate board meeting. It's a Norwegian company in early March, and we're going to give them a number of the amounts that you've spent to that point in time, and that payment is due within 30 days of the execution of the agreement. So, and that's not a refundable,
So, Jeff,
siting board.
Jeff,
Yeah.
I think what Member Holland said was, if the HCA is denied and the permit is denied, we would not receive any reimbursement on any of our legal payments. That's correct, right?
Yes, I misunderstood the question. I thought the question was, what happens if the siting board turns down the project, but the HCA is approved?
I believe that will be his next question.
Oh, we already answered that question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm all set for now, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mackey?
Thank you. Mr. Holland kind of hit the nail on the head. So based on a lot of the email questions we got, that's something I really wanted to walk through. So Mr. Bernstein, I appreciate you walking through that. So just to clarify, if we do not approve this agreement, I'm going to go one step further. This does not impact the state process. If we say no to this agreement tonight, that does not mean the state process is stopped. It does not impede the
Correct.
state process at all. So that's just
Yes.
one piece I wanted to clarify. Otherwise, I have no additional questions. Thank you.
Mr. Ryder?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Holland, for bringing that up, because that was a concern of mine, that the town has spent a significant amount of money to date, and I should say, we've spent funds to date without having any type of agreement.
Yes, it's close
In
to
putting this together.
$100,000.
Yes. So, and that was my concern too, making sure that if the board tonight did not agree to this, and the process would continue forward with the state, and whether it was approved or not approved, we would not be able to get these specific items that a lot of the residents asked us to put in. The funding for the reimbursement on the housing, on the potential loss, as well as the safety features, which I think were critical. I don't have any more questions, but I do want to make a statement. I know there has been a lot of concern that this board hasn't taken a stance. and I know Mr. Russo touched on this at the last meeting, and I do apologize for not being present in person. However, these initiatives for battery storage are coming from the state. They are being required for the energy utility providers. We've already seen there are 2 permitted in the state right now, Carver and Medway. As Mr. Curran stated, this agreement is much better than both of those. This board has never taken a decision or taken a stance because we had to negotiate in good faith. And we, as a board, and had Mr. Curran use special counsel to put all of those safety mechanisms into this. Without this agreement, we would not be receiving any of these items. And the process, as Mr. Holland stated, this process would continue forward. And whether it was approved or not approved, the process is still going forward. This board does not have a say. And as we've seen, other have been permitted. And there are going to be more permitted across this state. There are going to be more of these permitted across the state. And unfortunately, we cannot control, this board cannot control where this is put. They are going to go in locations where we have stations, power stations. They look to put those next to those locations. That is prime real estate for these types of facilities. So again, I think I'd like to thank Mr. Curran for putting this together. I think it's a very comprehensive HCA, and I will echo, we're not going to get everything that every single resident in this town wanted. But we did the best we could with what we had in our negotiating power. And I think it's a comprehensive report. So thank you, Mr. Curran. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Russo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't want to relitigate all the stuff that we've already been talking about, and I apologize, Mr. Curran. You said that all the answers to those questions from residents did go out. I apologize. I have not personally had a chance to look at all of them at this point.
Couldn't have, you probably just got them about a few minutes ago, so.
So I did, just for my own clarification, wanted to address a couple of points that I thought were relevant, and again, you touched on the property value stuff, so I won't rehash that. I guess in terms of transfer, if ownership changes on the Hillman side, what safeguards, I guess, ensure that the town is not exposed to either, weaker operators or reduced protections potentially. I think the HCA does a good job of requiring the assumption of obligations. Where I'm not clear that the HCA gives us a clear answer is on the standards of maybe the transferee's financial strength potentially, or whether guarantees, reset or they potentially weaken. I have my own recommendations on that, but again, I want to just kind of be clear on that, because at the end of the day, there are things, in my opinion, that I think move me closer to a yes on this HCA, and I think there are answers that potentially flag me towards a no, depending on that response. I did just want to get a little bit more clarity on that.
So if you look at the term on page 2, it talks about that Hillman Energy Center or a successor project owner. So it carries forward to whoever owns the project. All the terms of the HCA go with the successor. So if the project does change hands, whoever the owner is required to carry out the terms of the HCA until the project has ended. So what does that mean? The project has ended. So let's say for some reason, 10 years from now, we don't do anything with batteries anymore. It's all some other thing. And they have to decommission it. And that's when the project ends. That's when the HCA ends. But they would still have to decommission it, and there's still guarantees in there for $3 to $6 million that they would have to commit to pay to restore the site and all those things. As far as guarantees, and I think you were talking about, there is a section in here for guarantees, it's basically like a bond for, and the guarantee starts off at a high number and then goes down through the life of the bond, because they will have paid out. So, and those numbers haven't been filled in yet, because at the time, we were still negotiating what the HCA is, but now we have a very good idea of what the value of the HCA is. It's roughly $3.7 million. And, you know, we'll at some point have an understanding of what the value of the project is, and those numbers will get filled in. But that'll make sure that, you know, we get paid throughout the life of this term, and if they don't honor those commitments, then there's a vehicle for us through those guarantees to make sure that we are paid.
Okay, thank you for that. Talked about property value stuff, you know, the insurance, I know the insurance rates aren't filled in, you explained why and whatnot. Who is determining those amounts? Are they negotiable? Is it insurance companies setting those? Where does that power lie, I suppose?
So, I mean, I would defer to Jeff on that, I guess, but I think that, I mean, we set a minimum here of 20 million, but that could change, I would imagine, based on what the final value of the project is. And then Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
Only that insurance and the various bonds and guarantees are meant to backstop obligations against the project. I mean, this is a project that's going to cost well north of $100 million. And, you know, if there were a failure of Hillman, or if Hillman ends up selling or assigning it, and there's a provision about how that works, and a payment's not made when due, you'd go against the project. You'd also go against the bonds, the guarantees, the insurance. I mean, they're meant to be multiple backstops here. And also keep in mind that any entity that provides financing for this project, and they'll have debt financing. These projects are not equity projects. I mean, they are some equity, but most of it is financed with debt. It's going to require all kinds of, they may even come back to the town to make sure that they're fully performing all of their obligations. And anybody, if you, with mortgages, or if you have business debt, if you default under one agreement, your lender is not going to be happy. So there are a bunch of different ways to get there. And I actually have had projects where there were questions raised by outside lenders about whether or not the borrower was complying with all of its obligations to a town. So we still have some areas where we have to fill in the blanks in terms of numbers as we get closer, and there are notices that are being required, and the town has a series of remedies that it could use if it believed that a payment was due, whether it's for decommissioning on the back end, or the various annual payments that are supposed to be made, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. And you touched on something in terms of obligations to the town. So put the financial piece aside for a second. So in terms of enforceability and compliance, you know, whether it's complying to various standards, whether federal or locally within the town, aside from the obvious legal action, you know, which to me is sort of a last resort, you know, assuming it was something, you know, concerns. Again, I think the HCA does a great job of, requiring compliance with those laws, with those standards. Where I'm just trying to understand is, you know, what can we enforce for repeat or serious violations, whether it's related to fire safety, permitting, whether operations can be paused if there's multiple safety violations, let's say. Again, just trying to understand that a little bit better, because I was struggling with that in terms of this HCA and where it's at.
Sure. The siting board, in its approval, and they write these decisions that are sometimes several hundred pages long, and they have lots of enforcement language. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts would first try to enforce the decision, and if you believe that there was a breach, whether it was an obligation under the HCA or an obligation under the decision, which will assuming that it approves the project, would also incorporate much of, but not all, of the HCA. We'll ask for all of it, but I absolutely don't expect that. So you could go to the siting board, you could go to the Attorney General's office, you could go to other state agencies, depending on what the subject matter of a breach is, and you're going to have their attention in a bunch of different ways. So it doesn't mean you have to run to court. There also is a dispute resolution process under the HCA, so that going to court is the last resort unless it's an emergency and you need an injunction of some sort. So they've submitted themselves to the Massachusetts jurisdiction, and first the town manager and a responsible party for Hillman would try to work it out. If they couldn't, then there is in 30 days, there's a 60-day mediation process. It's alternative dispute resolution, which is designed to try to make going to court the last resort.
Okay.
So.
And then just my last question is on the emergency response plan. So again, I think that the HCA does, obviously it requires an emergency response plan. Obviously, it requires them to coordinate with fire, police, et cetera. In terms of the emergency response plan being completed, reviewed, and approved, does that requires fire department, police, maybe Board of Health, town manager, I guess, who's sort of, being sort of the rubber stamp on that from a local level within the town of Tewksbury?
So the ERP, it's the obligation of the project proponent to submit an emergency response plan to us, and then primarily the fire department looks at it and says, all right, you need to do this, you need to do X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
You shouldn't have one hotel that you're going to go to in a catastrophe, you should have 3, or, things like that. And there would be back and forth there on what they wanted in that ERP, and that ERP, I would imagine, would be, similar to what they have in place for other things. I mean, we have other, assisted living facilities that probably have similar type of emergency response plans. So it's not the fire department's first rodeo, but they would require them to do certain things. Now, I know there was some concern about like the language that reasonably require, but you have to remember that the one benefit that we have is being able to lean on the NFPA 855 standards, which kind of answers the last question you had too, which is even though you have the dispute resolution and also the EFSB enforcement, you also have the fire department can say, hey, that is not consistent with NFPA standards. You need to do X, Y, and Z. And they might argue that, but that is one of the areas that I think that we have leverage and strength, is that that's why I would envision there to be a dispute. They might say, well, we think that is a material change to the project, and the fire department will say, no, it's just an enforcement of the NFPA standards, and that becomes the issue. But I think the law will be on our side, because the NFPA standards, they're not just in Massachusetts, they're all over the country. So I think there's a lot of protection there, and a lot for the different agencies after the site permit is issued, like building and fire. They'll have a lot to lean on to enforce the codes and the things that they want to happen in those later parts of the project that will be decided after the permit's issued.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
I want to thank all my colleagues submitting their questions and reaching out. I also want to thank all the residents that came forward to our meetings and spoke up at this. I want to thank Melissa Braga. Over the last couple of days, we've received numerous emails. We asked them to copy myself and the chair of the Board of Health, but some of them came to me, some of them came to her, but we did copy each other to make sure that all the responses were answered, and she was copied on all the responses that went out as well, and they're all posted on the website. This is a permit that's issued through the state. It's unfortunate that it isn't local and we're not taking it to town meeting. I think people would feel like their voice was heard much better in the community, and I always like town meeting because the residents get to vote on things. These things, the state is putting out some permits, and they're trying to, Seems like the state is doing a lot with what we should be doing in our communities. This one right here, it's the energy. They're saying it's for the benefit of the greater good of the Commonwealth, so they're the issuing permit on this. The only thing I could say is before it does get operational, the fire department has to issue a safety permit before it's, I'll bring it to the attorney. It's, before this is operational, the fire department has to agree to all the safety measures that have been put in place before it can go into operation.
Yeah, and the siting board in its decision will have a number of conditions, and they'll have to come back and file compliance. So the siting board is going to be looking over, and the siting board, you know, regardless of what you think about having a state agency doing this, the siting board does have a lot of expertise dealing with these kinds of energy facilities, and they're going to be making compliance filings for several years, which will become a matter of public record. And if you as the select board or other boards in your town or residents feel like they're not complying, there's a forum to raise those issues. So it's not like the siting board will, if the siting board decides to approve this project, it's not like they'll approve it and then say, we're done.
Okay. It's not a typical permit. You know, usually if a permit comes in through the community, it goes through the planning board, everything's reviewed before the permit is issued, and you know exactly what the traffic safety plan is going to be. All those different things that everyone's asking for. This is a different procedure. That's how they do it in the state, but it cannot open unless the fire department issues that permit and makes sure that all the safety measures are put in place. It's the best I can tell you. I wish it was different, but that's their procedures. So. All right, at this time, I'm going to open it up to the board, if anybody has any recommendations on this.
I do have a comment.
Yes.
So I want to thank the residents that took the time to review the document that was provided on Wednesday. It's a big document. We had a long time to go through it. You guys only had like 72 hours, and there were some good questions that came out of it. Residents, again, you had 72 hours to review it, and it's kind of, there were some expressed concern and frustration on the fact that what was presented was already approved, was already ready to go, waiting for our formal approval, which is what may or may not occur tonight. So I want to apologize for those feelings of frustration. We can't control the state process that's been mentioned. We can't discuss ongoing negotiations. I think everyone understands that. But through the process, there were many questions that could have been answered. A lot of the questions that came in, since Wednesday could have been answered. So we could have done a lot better. We could have been a lot more engaged, a lot more transparent. I think moving forward, we need to be a little more engaged with residents so we don't let the fear, uncertainty, and doubt continue to grow. And I would hope that residents, you all watching, you all here in the room tonight, continue to hold us accountable. Continue to pay attention. Absolutely, ma'am. I was saying, I would hope that you all in the room and those watching at home continue to hold us accountable. Continue to pay attention, continue to stay engaged. You all elect us. We work for you. There are elections every year for various seats. So please pay attention, stay engaged. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have any other statements that they'd like to make? Okay. At this time, I'll open it up to any motions on this matter.
Mr. Chair, I will make a motion. I make a motion to move to accept and approve the host community agreement to be submitted to the Energy Facility Siting Board with the request that it be incorporated into the decision and further to authorize additional legal changes based on advice from special counsel and approved from the town manager.
I have a motion. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
We got a motion by Mr. Radis, second by Mr. Holland. All those in favor, please state by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye as well. That's 5-0. All right, that's the only thing we have on our agenda. At this time, I'll listen to any motions to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Need a motion? Do I have a second?
PJ?
Second.
Second. All those in favor, please state by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Thank you, everyone.